Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today's athlete is a data steward for a large agricultural company with a passion for competing and being in the fitness industry. She currently lives in Colorado, and when she isn't in the gym, she loves to hike, ski, and go on road trips with her boyfriend and her dogs. She runs a podcast called the Gym-ish Pod and is an online fitness coach who started competing in 2017 and went pro in 2021 at her third pro qualifying show, which was the NPC National Championships. Welcome to the show, Elenoa McCabe. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to have you on. And I got to ask if there's anything you do or think about right before your heel hits the stage.
Yes, I knew this was coming. I'm really excited for this. So when I started competing, it was kind of like super chaotic. I would just get in line, be nervous, and go on stage. But this past year, like 2021, when I was competing, I started like really trying to center myself backstage. So I'd have my headphones on. I would listen to like a YouTube motivational speech, those ones where like guys are yelling at you, like they're like, you can do this, it's your time, all this stuff. So I'd listen to that. And then when they'd start lining us up, I would really just think back on the prep and like all of those early mornings for cardio and like lifting, getting through those sessions, all the things that, you kind of sacrifice along the way. I would think about everything that I did in the prep and then kind of channel that energy into going on stage. And then right before, so the person before me going, I wouldn't really watch her. I'd kind of just let her go do her thing. And like in my head, I'd be looking at the judges, but I'd be thinking like, this is your time to shine, like go out there and show them the best version of you that you can. And then I would do like a tiny little prayer. I always just say like, please God, like place me where I deserve, and then, it would usually be my time by then.
That's really cool. I love that you go over the prep that you had and you reflect on it and you take the time to almost celebrate it and bring that energy of commitment and dedication to the stage and saying a prayer to ask that you're placed where you deserve to be. I find that especially interesting. So it almost seems like you're letting go of the placing and just getting up there to showcase all your hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to, when you're going on stage, like not put a lot of stock into where you place, because I think that leads to disappointment. And I've had experience with that too, but just I've learned over my years of competing that you really can't control like what the judges like where they place you, it's who shows up that day, but you can control like your energy that you bring to stage. And so I just really try and focus on that, like bring the best version of me that day that I can.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That like brought me back to this experience. I got off stage and I did not place, and I was really upset because this was 2020 and I had been prepping for so long, cancellation. I was like, I should have been ready. Like I should have been good to go. I was like in my head about it. I got off stage and I let myself pout a bit. I never am a bad sport. That's for sure. Yeah. Like you're not going to see me pout, but like, I remember sitting at the pool with my boyfriend and I was just like so upset about it. But then that lasted like maybe 8 minutes. And then it was like, it's like, yes, feel it and be okay with the fact that you're disappointed. And I think it's important to feel disappointment and feel the negative emotion, but also recognize like all the commitment you made, that placing and disappointment is not the defining factor of your prep experience or your worth or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like the judges don't see the effort that you put in day out. Like they don't see the journey that you've gone through. So when you're putting like all of that I don't know, like all of the feeling into like, oh man, I didn't place, like, and you're so disappointed. Like, of course it's natural to be disappointed, but just not letting that take over your whole experience, you know, because you did the thing, like you completed the prep, you stepped on stage, and that's huge.
Yeah, I really love that. It's a good reminder too, especially I think for, well, I guess it's a good reminder for everybody, because whether you're a new competitor or you've been chasing your pro card, there's going to be times where you don't get what you want or expected. And for you though, you knew you wanted to be an IFBB pro after your first show in 2017, but you took
I did.
you took 3 years off after that. So talk to us about what inspired the break and how you knew you wanted to be a pro.
Yeah, so I took some time. So I competed in 2017 for the very first time. And like, it was one of those things when I stepped on stage, I just felt so at home. Like I can't even describe it. I'm not an extroverted person at all either. Like I'm very introverted. I don't really like to, I don't know. I don't like to be in the spotlight, but being on stage, it just felt so good. It felt like I belonged up there, and I just fell in love with it. So after that, like my very first show, looking back, I was way, way, way too small, and I knew that. So I knew that I had to take time off. And so I took all of 2018 and most of 2019 off. And then I did compete at the end of 2019. And then I competed in 2020 and then again in 2021. So not a super long break, but well, I guess a year and a half. Yeah, that is kind of a long break. But I knew, like looking back, like if I ever want to be pro, and I did, because at that time, like, you know, when you're new, you're looking at you're almost looking at the Olympians, or at least I was. So I was following like Angelica and Janet and all of these big names. And I was like, I want to do what they're doing. Like, I want to go to the Olympia. But then my coach was like, okay, well, you need to be a pro first. So like, you know, slow your roll.
Yes.
And so after that, I was like, all right, if I really truly want this, like I have to take the time off. So I went into that improvement season, and it ended up being very, very long. But I think I built a really good foundation from that point. And like since then, I haven't had to take a ton of time off, just because I did take that time initially. And I think that that's just kind of an important thing for people to do. And I'm not sure if like maybe the tide is turning, because I've seen a lot of competitors who do take that time off now. But I think before, like back 2017, 2018, it was a lot more common that girls would do shows back to back to back to back and like not really give themselves a chance to grow and improve.
I totally agree with you, because I remember like when Angelica would do her YouTube of her like improvement seasons or her like, you know, post-show experiences.
Yeah.
It was like a big thing. Like people were watching it because it was like, oh, look, she eats in her improvement season. Like she gains weight. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, but like now that's normal. Like this is supposed to happen. And I think it became more normalized over the years. And also, like you said, like you recognize you had to be bigger, and the division has evolved to a point where we can't just go compete back to back to back from the very first show if you aren't already looking like a pro. Like it takes so much more muscle maturity, muscle density, muscle shape, muscle size. Like that's the demand has increased dramatically in the bikini division. So time off is necessary, whether it's 3 months or it's 2 years, you know, whatever it is, but you got to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I'm so glad, like, I'm really glad that it's being normalized, and that, you know, girls are seeing, you know, you might turn pro, but even some of these new pros, they've had to take a long time off as well. It just depends on how hard your prep is. Like Nadia is coming to mind. You know, she turned pro at Nationals 2020, and she ended up taking this entire year off. You know, she's prepping for her pro debut now. And Nadia has muscle. Like she, you know, it's not like she was small to begin with, but just seeing that it's okay and normal to take long time off to grow and improve. I just love that, because I think it puts people's health kind of at the front, instead of just like, oh, let's see how fast we can get to the top.
Yes, I think that's so important. And equally as important is knowing when is it a good time to come back to the stage. So how do you know when it's time to come back after you've taken a break?
For me, it was like a mix because I do blood draws, so I get my blood work done. And I've changed coaches a couple times, but I'm finally with a coach who I just like completely trust 100% with my health and with competing. And I know that he'll get me where I want to go. But yeah, so initially it was just like blood work and making sure that internally things were looking good. They were in an optimal place to begin prep. And then also I look at like if I've had a cycle for a consistent amount of time, and then also just like feeling really good. Like if I'm just like really happy and everything in my life is aligned, then I'm like, okay, this is a good time that I could start prep versus, there's been times in my life where we're moving or stuff at my job is getting a little wild. So it kind of depends, but I look at a lot of factors across my life because prep is huge. Like it's going to affect your social life, your work life, your personal relationships. It takes a lot of time and dedication. So I try to make sure that everything's kind of aligned before I go into it. Also financially, I think that's kind of important too, because I've had friends who dive into competing and then, they're like, oh, I'm, really struggling financially because it's not easy. Like these shows are really expensive, but the coaching, the foods that we eat, like dieting, everything, like the gym memberships, posing coaches. I mean, the list just goes on, and like show day itself, everything, there's a cost to it. And to me, like if you're going to compete, like you want to compete to win. So you want to be optimal with everything. And that's going to include finances because you really don't want to cut corners.
So true. And you don't want to be in a position where you step off stage and you're broke. And now
Right.
you can't even commit to your reverse, you can't commit to life outside of it because a basic need isn't met.
Exactly. Yep.
So I think that's an important point is it's like you gotta have your ducks in a row and make sure you're prepared for the investment and know that it's okay to say, I started a prep. I am no longer in the position to prep. Therefore, I need to step back because you're going to live the lifestyle anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's super important. And that's a lesson that like I had to learn the hard way too. I was like, I wanted prep this year, but I just don't think it's in the cards financially. And like talking with my coach, he's like, that's understandable. Like, let me know if that changes and we'll go from there. But it's just kind of like, you have to have everything lined up. So then that way it's not extra stressful when you're done. Like you said, like you want to be able to continue to live the lifestyle and not be stressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be it can be difficult enough as it is. So doing everything you can, like you said earlier, that's within your control is important. And you talked also about how you feel like you finally found a coach who you really trust and who can back you and support you in getting where you want to go. So how did you decide on working with your coach and what do you think is important to that coaching relationship?
Yeah. I actually found him by listening to his podcast. So I was working with a local coach here in Colorado, and I absolutely love all of my coaches. Like we still have a relationship. I like my first coach, my second coach, and then now my current coach. But I still keep in contact with all of them. Like we're all good friends, and I made sure like leaving them not to burn any bridges or anything. Like I just think sometimes you want something different or you outgrow certain situations. But yeah, so I was listening to my current coach's podcast, and I was like, man, this guy kind of scares me. Like he's really intense and I think I want to work with him. Like I really like what he's preaching on his podcast. And I went to his Instagram, I looked at the results that he was getting with his clients, and I kind of messaged current clients and previous clients and kind of asked around. And I just took my time with the whole thing because I was like, if I'm going to switch coaches again, like I want to make sure that this is the right fit because I'm not trying to switch coaches every year like that. When you switch coaches, it's like someone has to learn your body all over again. And so I just knew like if I switch, like this has to be it. Like I want this coach to be my coach for the rest of my competing career. So I reached out to him and we messaged a little bit, and I had this feeling, like I just had such a good feeling about him that I was like, you know what, let's just do it. So I applied, and I heard back from him, and we got rolling. But, you know, honestly, like working with him, I love the team that he's built, the community. And I think that everything that he puts out is straight from his heart. Like he coaches from a place of caring and understanding, and he puts his athletes above everything else. So even just working with him this past year, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did. Like, I'm so glad I made that jump. And I don't think I'm going to work with anybody else.
Wow. So with competing, like we have to push our bodies a lot of times to limits we're not always used to going to. And then sometimes we have to take it even further. And I think that requires a lot of trust in our coach and in ourselves. So making a decision like that is really important. So what are some things that you did or maybe looked out for to make sure that the protocols or efforts that you are being asked to do, especially by a new coach, were going smoothly?
Oh man, I think I just had a lot of like innate trust in him from the get-go. But every check-in, like he would ask for my biofeedback, and then he would also ask like, how are you doing? Like mentally, emotionally, if it like, don't just tell me like your biofeedback, like tell me how you are. And we've kind of built this relationship. Like we have our coach athlete relationship, but I also maybe this is just how I feel, I'm not sure, but I also kind of feel like he's a friend. But he is able to kind of put on that coaching hat and push me to where I need to go. And I've just seen with a lot of his other clients who are like now my friends, like my fellow teammates and everything, he coaches us from a place of like understanding and empathy, but he's also able to kind of flip the switch, and like push us because he sees our potential. Like he believes in us so much and he wants us to succeed like as badly as we want it. And I think it's just clear to me, like in our interactions and in our check-ins and just like throughout the week, like he really cares. So even if he is telling me, you know, you're gonna have to push, like this is gonna suck, it's like, all right, I'm gonna do it because I know like in the end, this is gonna get me closer to my goal, you know?
Yeah, like you trusted him, you knew that you were committed to the goal, and with commitment to a goal means you have to be willing to push beyond a particular measure you've pushed before. And sometimes that's hard, but if you have someone who cares about you beyond just executing a plan, I think that supports that process a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly what I was getting at. It's just kind of like you do the plan, but you know that beyond that, he cares. Like if you are really struggling, he'll work with you to mitigate that. Like he's not just going to be like, well, just do your plan. Good luck.
So let's talk about the struggle, because 2 weeks out from earning your pro card, you were feeling like giving up and you self-sabotage. So can you walk us through what was happening at the time and how you worked through it?
Yeah. So I had competed from August, and then we were aiming for December nationals. And originally our plan was, you know, August, a local show in Texas, because that's where he is. So I was going to go compete so he could come see me in person. And then we were going to do North Americans and go for that pro card. But I placed third at North Americans. So we were like, you know, why don't we just push to nationals? Like, I think you can do it. And it was really difficult because my show in Texas, my feedback from the judges was that I was a smidge too lean. Like they said, your hamstrings are a little bit too etched for our liking. They're like, you need to come in softer. So like, I've never gotten feedback like that before. Like normally it's, you need to grow or you need to be a little bit more conditioned. And so getting the feedback that like, oh, you're too conditioned, you need to be a little softer. It was like, whoa, okay. So we reversed into North Americans, which was 2 weeks later. And unfortunately at North Americans, the feedback that I got was you were too soft from the back. Like you needed to be a little bit tighter. And so we were like, dang it. Like we just, we missed the mark there too. And so coming in tighter for nationals, we we're like, well, we could do that. I think it was a 16 or 17 weeks in between. So we did like a little bit of a reverse, or honestly, it was more of a recovery diet. We put on like 10 pounds between my stage weight from Texas and then like somewhere maybe like 6 weeks post North Americans, I was about 10 pounds up, which doesn't sound like a lot, I feel like, to regular people, but for competitors, like 10 pounds, it's a little scary for like an 8-week period. And then we, started the cut again. And for some reason, I just kept getting in my head that like, oh, I haven't had enough time to improve. Like, because I think for me, when I compete, every time I step on stage, I want to be better. I want to be improved. I don't just want to keep bringing the same package over and over again. Because if the package didn't get you your desired results, then to me, I'm like, okay, I need to improve. So I just kept getting in my head. And I think over the course of those 16 weeks, there was just a lot of self-doubt that started building. And I had a lot of life stress so we moved in October. And so I was still on prep. And it was just kind of a big stressor, I think, at that time. And my body wasn't responding like exactly how we wanted it. And so I think I just got frustrated and I got in my own head and I kept it to myself. And I kind of think that's really the key reason why I ended up doing what I did. So basically going into Thanksgiving, I was still dieting really hard. We started pushing actually the day after Thanksgiving. So cardio went up, food went down, and I was looking really, really good. And he's like, oh, you're going to be ready like beforehand, like you're on the right track, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see it. Like I would look in the mirror and I'd be like, oh, I'm not lean enough. Like I was too soft at North Americans and I'm going to be too soft again. And I was just in my head, but I wasn't communicating with my coach or honestly anybody in my support system. Like I didn't tell my boyfriend. I didn't tell any of my friends how I was feeling. I kind of just bottled it up and was like, well, everybody keeps saying like, you got this, you're going to go pro. And the external validation, like it's really nice to hear that, but it honestly doesn't sink in. Like it would kind of go in one ear out the other, because I was like, these people are they're just hyping me up. Like you don't actually know, like I might not go pro. And then, did I just spend 16 weeks prepping when I could have spent that time growing and maybe compete again in 2022? So I just think I had a lot of conflicting thoughts in my head and I wasn't doing a good job about communicating those out. And then that 2 weeks out, so it was kind of funny, like looking back now, like me and my coach laugh about it, but he had just given me like 4 days off. It's like, he was like, okay, you're looking really good. I want you to take 4 days of just complete rest, like no training, no cardio, and check in again after 4 days. And then we'll go from there. And for some reason, like that just made me snap. Like that night, literally day one of this break, when I could have been just relaxing and enjoying myself and like this free time that I had, I ended up like binge eating. And I don't know what possessed me to do it. I think it was just all of that self-doubt that had been building and building. And at first I was like, okay, like tomorrow I'll just, I'll go do a bunch of cardio. And then I was like, no, like that's not going to help anybody. You need to tell your coach, like it doesn't matter that you're embarrassed and all of this stuff. Like you have to tell him and he's going to help you through this. Like you can't do this on your own. It's too much. So then I called him and, he was so understanding. He was like, oh, Noah, I'm so sorry. Like, let's just come up with a game plan, like add cardio back in, like add training back in. Let's just see if we can make this a refeed. Like we were like, all right, let's see if we can mitigate like the quote unquote damage. And it didn't work. Unfortunately, we like tried to bring me back to baseline and my body wasn't responding. I shot up 4 pounds and I couldn't lose it. Like I was inflamed, and that was definitely adding to my stress. Um, and then I got in a car accident right before peak week, and we were still kind of dealing with the slip up that I had just had, like trying to get that weight off of me. And something about having this car accident, like nobody was hurt. Luckily, I wasn't hurt. The other driver wasn't hurt. It was just our cars were totaled, but it kind of put it in perspective for me that like life is so short, and you really don't know what's going to happen. Like you could be in a car accident one day. And I kind of used that as like a motivator to finish out the prep as strongly as I could. And just telling myself, like, when you step on that stage, like, how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel like you did everything that you could and, you executed everything with intent? Or do you just want to be like, oh, I made it to the finish line, like I made it to stage? And so a switch kind of flipped for me there. And unfortunately, like my coach, he had to really push, like we both had to really push into nationals. I was on 2 hours of cardio, 0 carbs, and like very like little amounts of fat. And it was honestly mostly just protein. But and I was kind of laughing about it. It wasn't that hard. Like I had this like burst of energy and effort that kind of came from realizing that, life is precious, and I'm choosing to compete. Like I'm choosing this lifestyle. And why am I doubting myself when I know in the past I've put in all of this work? And it kind of came down to like, I deserve to be there as much as anybody else. And it doesn't matter what happens to me in my daily life. Like the outside circumstances might happen, but what I can do, what I can control, like that's what I need to focus on. And just having that mindset and that energy, it carried me into nationals, even though we had to push really hard.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wow. Well, I think it's amazing that you were able to take something challenging and turn it into an opportunity to say life is short, life can be surprising, let's make the most of it. And that seems to have shifted you from a place of self-doubt to a place of worthiness.
Yeah, definitely. It completely changed my mindset. And I don't know, I think that's what really, really helped me find the success that I did at nationals.
Yeah. How long did you how long were you doing like no carbs, trace fats, and mainly proteins?
I think I want to say it was like 6 or 7 days. So for about a week. It was part of peak week. And then the week prior, just like we tried not to go to those depths. Like I know that my coach was like, I don't want to put you here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, it is what it is. Like we're going to have to really push. And I just joke about, we joke about it now. Like, I'm like, well, it's the consequences to my actions. Like I kind of did it to myself.
And that's in reference to things post show, or that's in reference to the binge in
Oh,
prep?
to the binge during prep.
How did
Yeah.
you move past that mentally? Because I know there's a lot of girls who probably have, or maybe they're in prep right now and they've binged and they're thinking, well, now I'm the worst competitor ever. I'm never going to be successful. I'm a failure. I don't deserve anything I want. Like
Oh my
those,
God. Yeah.
those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
How did you
Well,
get through that?
my heart just goes out to those women who experience that, because, I think we've all been there, like whether it's during prep or post show. Like I think I would argue almost every competitor has had some sort of experience with just either overeating or binge eating. And it's hard. It's really hard, because you do feel all those things. Like you feel like you're not worthy, and like you're a bad person or something. But I guess for me, like personally, my biggest, like, I guess my biggest tip, and like the thing that I did that I think helped the most, was just communicating with my coach, like being straight up and telling him, hey, I had a slip up today and it was big. Like I really cheated on the diet. I just binged and I need your help. Because I think the more that you keep it to yourself and you internalize it, that the harder it's going to be to move on. And if you have a coach, like if you're working with a coach, that's what they're there for, you know, that's their job. We're here to serve you. And it's like the reason why I told my coach was also because like we're 2 weeks out, like I can't mitigate this on my own. I need his help because I don't know what I just did, like how it's going to affect my body in the long term. Like I need his eye, I need his help to navigate through it. And I think having him there really helped my like mindset, and just know that I'm supported and know that he's not mad at me. Like he's not disappointed. He understands it's been a long season, and he's just like, okay, how can we get past this? How can we fix this? And then also just telling my boyfriend like, hey, I slipped up today. Like I kind of need a little bit of extra support. That really helped too. And that's helped me in the past with binge eating, like post show, especially. I'll tell my boyfriend like, hey, I think we need to get rid of this food in the house, or can you hide this food for me? Because if it's just sitting there, like I'm going to go eat it. And so just having like somebody there to support you, whether it's in person or like on the phone, talk you through it, I think that's really big.
Definitely. It's a very common thing for competitors to go through. I mean, I have now worked with hundreds of competitors who struggle, whether it's post show or in prep, with their relationship with food and their body image, and of course then their goals and how these things all work together and interact. And the identity of being a competitor comes with many different expectations depending on what's been reinforced in our life as a competitor, and or what we've seen or heard from other people too. Like it comes with these expectations. So I think it's really cool that you were able to foster that forgiveness, and that you had people in your life who could support you and show you like it's okay that happened, like you're moving forward. And then you did have a positive result. Of course, the process maybe looked different than you were expecting, but the result that you wanted eventually came, which was earning your pro card. And that was a dream of yours from when you had started competing. So once you earned it, and knowing everything that you had been through that long prep, how did it feel?
Oh my gosh. It felt like unreal. Like I don't even know if I can describe it. When they called my name on stage, because with prejudging, like you kind of know, but you don't know. So since Nationals is a 2-day show, on Friday, when I left the stage, everyone was like, oh, you were center stage. Like they didn't move you at all. You know, you got this, it's yours, and all this stuff. And I was just like, well, you never know, you know, we have finals tomorrow. Like, you don't know. But I was excited, of course, but I was also like, okay, well, don't get your hopes too up, because you really never know. And then finals, when they're calling everybody for their placings. And then I realized like, oh my gosh, it's me and this other girl, like we're the top two, like, oh my gosh, you know, top two get their pro cards. This feeling of like almost relief, honestly, started like bubbling up. And then when they called the other girl for second, I almost started crying on stage, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I just got my pro card. And not only that, like I just won the class. So it was unreal. It felt so good to just achieve that goal.
And I think that the key word there is like achieve that goal. Like there was so much work that went into it for years leading up to it. And we talked earlier about how winning doesn't define you, and the work is what really matters. So what kind of personal growth came with the pursuit of your pro card and then the achievement of it?
Yeah. I think competing has like shaped me as a woman so much. Just my mindset from when I started until now, I've gone through so much like internal mindset work that it still like blows my mind sometimes looking back. But I've turned a lot to gratitude, and like practicing just like taking things one at a time, day by day, like not getting super overwhelmed with these big goals, because I feel like in this sport specifically, like I have very, very big goals. And sometimes if you just look at that end goal, you can get overwhelmed, like, oh, I have so much work to do. But if you can break it down and look at it day by day, it becomes a lot more manageable. And I just think competing has empowered me, like as a woman. It's built up my confidence. It's made me feel strong. It's built up like a community of women around me that I've gotten to know through competing. And I just I think that like in the pursuit of my pro card, like I actually just started acting like a pro. And you hear that a lot, like, oh, if you want to go pro, you need to act like a pro. And I think that that's so true, because these athletes at the top level, like they're not messing around, you know, they get what they need to get done. And of course, like we're all still living life, like they're not just solely focused on prep and competing. But the things that they do on the daily basis, like, you know, getting all their water in, hitting their macros or following their meal plan, training, all of that stuff, posing, it's super important. And I think that they just make it such a part of their day. And I ended up doing the same, like reflecting back on 2021, I can say like I posed every single day. And I've never done that in the past. Normally I didn't start posing until I was looking like lean. So maybe like 10 or 8 weeks out, I'd start really posing, you know, but I learned like, if I want to be a pro, like I need to pose every day. And so in myself to it. And it honestly didn't take away from my daily life. Like you can pose for 5 minutes, you can pose for 30. There's time in your day to do those things that you need to do. And I just think that executing all of that and making it a part of my life is what led me to getting my pro card, was just embodying what the pros do, and not making it into, I don't know, not making it a thing, like not being like, oh, like I'm acting like a pro, I'm going to get my pro card, but just actually doing it, I guess.
Mm. You embodied it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. I think that that's key. I honestly, I think that like the personal growth that I've gone through is largely like mental, like my mindset. And even my boyfriend, he and I talk about it all the time, because I met him 4 years ago. So I had only competed once before I met him. And when I met him, I told him like, I'm a competitor, you know, even though I'd only done one show, but I told him like, this is something that I want to do and I'm serious about it. And so like I use a food scale every day. Like that's just something you're going to have to accept about me. And he's been there through the whole journey, and he reminds me a lot like of how far I've come, because he was like, yeah, I remember when I met you, like how you used to think about like, oh, I have to go to the gym, or oh, I have to go do this cardio. And now it's like, oh, I get to go to the gym and I get to do my cardio, and just shifting the perspective and really coming from a place of gratitude. And it's made a big difference, like in a lot of different aspects of my life, like not just competing.
Yeah, it really does impact so much of our life. And I think it's really great that you provide this example of how you explain that you're a competitor, and these are some of the things that you can expect from me. And if you're willing to accept it, great. If not, oh well, sayonara.
Yep.
So how did you communicate that it was that important? Like, did you straight up say like, if you can't accept it, then it's not going to work? Or did any part of you feel like, oh, I'm not going to be accepted? Like, where was your head at in setting that type of boundary or expectation?
Yeah. So I guess when I started competing, I was in college, and a lot of my friends like didn't quite understand it at first. Like, you know, oh, you're not going to come out to Taco Tuesday with us anymore, like that kind of thing. And so when I was dating, a lot of the times, like the guys that I would go on dates with, they'd be like, oh, like you can't go out to eat all the time, or you can't go do this. And it was like, well, I can go out to eat, but I'll bring my own food. Like we can go on dates, but I might order like plain chicken and rice or something. Like I just kind of knew from experience, like with my roommates and my friends, that when I started dating, it became kind of a talking point. And so when I met my boyfriend, I was kind of at the point where it was like, all right, I don't want to have to explain myself. Like this is just part of me. And so I was really honest with him just from the get-go. Honestly, I told him straight out, like, yep, I competed and I love it and I'm going to keep competing. And so, I measure out my food, and we might not be able to go on food dates, but we can go like hiking, we can go mini golfing, like we can go to the movies. Like I tried to balance it, like we can't go on food dates anymore, but I tried to give like options where he was like, okay, like I guess I can do stuff with this girl. But yeah, I just think I knew that it was something that I wanted to do, and communicating that outright with people just felt a lot better. It was almost like setting a boundary from the get-go, and if they could respect that boundary, then I knew they could be someone that I could be with.
I think that's so good. Like I met my boyfriend when I had been in prep well, I had already been into the lifestyle, but then I told him I was going to do a competition, and like he already saw me living it before. And I think that's really important, is you have to know yourself and you have to be comfortable and confident with what the process really requires for other people to respect the process too. Because if we have a negative attitude about it, or we're like, oh, I have to do this and I don't want to do it, but this is what I'm going to do to be, it's like they will start to have that attitude too.
Right.
So it's like really important that we have come to terms with what it requires to get where we want to go. And some people will be like, I don't want to commit to what's required. And that's okay. Like that's probably better to figure that out. But know that bodybuilding will impact these areas of your life. It's important.
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
So how do you prioritize time with your boyfriend and traveling that you do and your other athletic enjoyments, and how do you maintain those those passions and keep your focus on your goals?
Yeah, I think this past year was really big in me learning how to balance that, honestly, because I think previously with my past preps, I haven't been very good at balancing. And every single prep, we learn something better, I guess, like how to better navigate. So yeah, I guess I'll just like get real vulnerable on here. But my boyfriend and we actually started going to therapy in 2020, because when everything was shut down and, everyone was kind of unsure what was happening, like he and I both work from home, and we were in this tiny little apartment. Like it was like 800 square feet apartment. Like, so we were in close proximity every single day, and we started like fighting a lot more. And we like previous to this, like we have been such a like happy-go-lucky, like not really argumentative type couple. And so this was really different for us. So we started going to therapy, and I think having that third party, like giving us the tools and helping us through our patterns and our behaviors and kind of the relationship dynamic that we were falling into, I think just learning how to navigate through that really helped. But then it's also really helped with when I'm on prep. So we actually currently still see that same therapist. We love him. He's like he's like our friend. Honestly, sometimes it feels like we're talking to a friend now.
Yeah.
But we do couples counseling like once a month. Excuse me. And at this point, it's kind of more like maintenance for our relationship. Like we're still working on things, but our communication has gotten a lot better, and navigating through these time periods of prep has gotten a lot better, because in 2021, when I was doing this run for my pro card, I kind of went to like a whole nother level of focus, honestly. Like from June until August, and August was that show in Texas, my focus was something else. Like I got tunnel vision, and having these like monthly therapy sessions where my boyfriend was able to express like, hey, like, I feel like you're really, really zoned into prep, and like, I'm kind of feeling left out. Just him being able to even communicate that was huge. And it kind of made me realize like, okay, prep is a temporary thing. And this relationship is something that is super important to me. And like while competing and being successful in competing is super important to me, this relationship is likely going to outlast that. Like, as much as I would love to compete forever, I don't know if I will. Like, I could see myself competing into like 40s or 50s, but like at some point, you know, like it's not going to be such a big thing in my life. At least maybe not competing. I'd also love to like get into judging or like show promoting or something. Like I'd love to stay in the industry, but just competing and putting my body through preps, I just don't think is going to be forever, versus like this relationship. Like, you know, he's the one I want to be with for the rest of my life. So I'm not going to sacrifice our relationship for this, you know, 16-week prep or whatever it is. And so what we've learned is that, you know, eight-ish weeks out is when I really start dialing in and things get hard. And that's when my energy might dip, and I might not be able to go out as often. Like I still try and go out and see friends and fulfill that social aspect of my life. But there's a point in prep when it's like, okay, you really have to like dial in and just focus on getting through everything that you need to get through to make like your energy is just low, you know, and sometimes you want to go to bed at 2 p.m. So it's like, you really got to start prioritizing and time managing correctly. And so we know like 8 weeks out, okay, Noah is starting to dial in, and like he'll step up and he'll start, you know, helping with chores or meal prep or taking our dog for a walk more often because I just don't have the energy. And then post show, we make it like a huge priority for kind of this quote unquote like repair / recovery phase for our relationship. So like post show, we really prioritize going out together on dates, just us two, or doing new experiences. Like we're gonna go dog sledding in a couple weekends, and we've never
Nice.
done that. Yeah, and so it's like like we try and schedule in like experiences and like new things to do together, just to re-strengthen and like reconnect our relationship. Because like as much as I want to say like, oh, we're, you know, we're fine, we're great, it's perfect, everything's great, like, you know, during prep and doing shows and stuff, it's really tough on the relationship. So just making sure that I prioritize him post show and prioritize us has been like a really key factor in making sure our relationship stays strong.
I think that's amazing. And I'm so glad that you chose to share that and open up about it, because couples counseling in general is fantastic. And to be proactive with it and focus on, okay, we have now recognized a pattern. Here's how we can overcome it or address it in the future. And there's this like very common couples counseling approach, the Gottman method. And Gottman had found that, you know, 2/3 of relationship conflict is actually perpetual. And so that can sound like really negative, right? But like, it doesn't mean that it's not still a good relationship. And I think that in applying it to what you've shared and just people listening in general, it's like, if there's something you're unwilling to change, right? Like if it's part of your lifestyle, such as bodybuilding, then can you be willing to not solve the problem, because you can't, but can you be willing to work with it? Can you be willing to make changes after the fact or adjust? And it's a partnership, right? You both have to be committed to it. And it sounds like you guys have found a way to do that. And you recognize, okay, 8 weeks out, I might not be as pleasurable, but you just wait, because after that, we're going to do all the fun things. And I love that you guys were able to talk it out. And it wasn't just like, well, I don't accept you anymore because at 8 weeks, you're not the same person. It's like, I still accept you, I support you. And now it's important that you accept and support that after the show, I expect these things as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you summed it up perfectly. Like, it's just, 8 weeks out, we know, okay, Noah's going to get intense, and it's not a reflection of like our relationship. It's just
Mhm.
like, it's just a very temporary thing. And then, ride it out, because post show is going to be fun.
Yeah, hell yeah. And after your show, you had made a post setting intentions and goals for yourself. So I love this. I think setting post show intentions and goals is a major opportunity, positive opportunity for competitors to thrive post show. So, can you explain your intention behind this and what led you to setting those intentions and how you've been able to follow through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just found, like you said, like being able to set these intentions post show, it almost gives you like a roadmap, because in the past I've had times where post show I just feel kind of lost. Like, what am I doing? Is this right? Am I doing enough? Like, there's no end date in sight. And I was kind of married to like a timeline, but now, just through multiple preps and post shows and just, living life and having more experiences, I've learned that if I can set intentions, it acts in place of that timeline. Like, it acts as something that I can look to and measure my success by. And so I won't feel lost. And I think, so that post show goals and intentions post, I talked about like finding that sense of balance again. And I know that that's kind of a tricky word, I guess, in the fitness industry. Like, some people are like, oh, balance doesn't exist, or we love balance. I think, I don't know. I don't know how people feel about the word balance, but for me, for me, I think like that just means getting back to a life that is sustainable. So not doing hours of cardio, not having no energy to do anything, but just rather being able to be a little bit spontaneous, take these trips, just basically live my life while also still living the lifestyle. And at this point, it has become so ingrained in me to like go to the gym, drink my water, hit my steps. Like, those aren't things that I necessarily have to think a whole lot about anymore. Um, but being able to set the intention of finding that new balance, it just, well, for me, I guess with prep, like, I am very, very rigid. So like turning that off, or like moving away from that rigidity and that control, it just takes practice. And so I think writing down like, I want to be balanced, it just reminds me that there's more to life than that control and prep, that it's okay to not go train today because I want to go see a friend or something like that. I'm trying to think what else I put on that post. I know I talked about
Blood work. You did talk about that.
I did get blood work done at the 6-week mark, and it came back, and surprisingly, everything looked pretty good. I did
Whoa.
have,
Nice.
yeah, even my coach was like, what is this? Like,
It's like you realize you were only eating protein, right? Like,
right. Yeah. Like, he was honestly like really surprised. And I was too, to be quite honest. I was like, wow, this is not too bad. Like, we did have my T3 was a little bit low, but not low enough to like be worried. It was like on the lower range of the like optimal spectrum. And the only thing that we noticed was that maybe my iron was really high, but I also hadn't gotten my cycle back yet. So I think our plan is to get blood work done again, like maybe 1 or 2 months from now, when I've had a consistent cycle, just to make sure that levels are where they need to be. And since I got my blood work done, I have gotten my cycle back. So I think as long as that keeps on track, things should be good. But yeah, I was very, very surprised by my blood work. I was
yeah.
like, okay, this is a good thing. Like, it's a good surprise. But yeah, my coach was not too unhappy with what we saw.
Well, I just think it's awesome that you set those intentions, you follow through on them, and you're consistent with this, and you're taking care of yourself on all the levels that are necessary. And I want to talk about some of the changes you made between North Americans and national championships. The few that stood out to me in reflecting on your journey was your posing, your training style, and your training style, which then led me to wonder about your nutrition too. So why don't we start with posing? You had focused on it a lot between those two shows, and you felt that it made a big difference for you. So what specifically did you change, and was it based off of feedback regarding posing? I would just love to hear that what inspired that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned it earlier. I made like a commitment to myself about posing every day for 2021.
Nice.
And I had done that up until up until North Americans. And then at North Americans, just looking back at my stage photos, I wasn't happy with the way that my body looked. I don't know. And I was like, is it my physique or is it my posing? And so then I went back to the drawing board and I hired a posing coach again. And I've worked with Jazzy. She's amazing. I love her. She helped me like get my walk together because I could not walk in heels at first. And so Jazzy like really, really helped me like cement down a good walk. I still need to work on it for sure, but she's at least improved me enough that I feel confident with it. And then I also worked with Megan Long. And so she is actually the one who noticed it, but my hips were misaligned. And so I needed to go to a chiropractor basically. So between North Americans and national championships, I started doing weekly body work. So I would get deep tissue massage. And then I was doing like bi-weekly chiropractic visits. So just getting dry needling done, doing some rehab exercises, and really getting my hips to be aligned again. I remember going to the chiropractor the first time. I was home at my parents' house in California, and I went to go see this chiropractor, and she was like, oh, yep, you're definitely misaligned. And so she went to like fix my back basically, and my hips just felt like they popped back into place, and it was almost like my whole body did like a sigh of relief. Like I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize how bad it was. And so I think that was like huge with my posing, was just getting my body work done and keep taking care of that. I don't know, like the muscular work. And then with posing specifically, like I realized I need to keep my shoulders back and my chest up and not lean forward, because that's what I pinpointed was what I didn't like about North Americans in my front pose. I was trying to create more shape, I think, but I inadvertently looked like I wasn't standing tall. So I call it the leaning tower of Pisa. Like I was like leaning with my chest forward a little bit, and it just made me look uneven, and it kind of crunched my waist. So just making sure when I practice posing that I'm standing up really tall and I'm keeping my shoulders even, and like your chest should be like up and not caved in. So those were some of the things that I think I improved regarding like my front pose. And then with my back pose, we didn't tweak too much. It was just making sure it was making sure that if my hips were aligned, that I was like, that I looked symmetrical. But actually, I think at nationals, because of traveling on the plane and everything, they started to shift again. Like my QL got really tight, and it started pulling my right glute and like hip up. So actually what I had to do for national championships was put more weight on my right leg, like in the back pose. And so when I was posing, I felt uneven, and like I felt like I was going to look unsymmetrical, but in the pictures I look very symmetrical. So it's kind of a weird thing. You just have to like play with it and like know your body. But yeah, that was a big thing for me, was making sure that my hips were aligned properly.
Wow. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how just like going and seeing someone for body work or going and getting something adjusted can make such a difference in the way our physique looks. I mean, especially at that level of conditioning,
Yeah.
it's obvious.
It's so important. I wish I would have done it sooner. Like, that's the only thing. I'm like, man, if I would have gotten this body work done years ago, like, but yeah, it's been great. And I definitely have still been keeping up with it. And I recommend to like all the competitors that I know, like I'm always telling them, like, you need to get your body work done. It's so important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I neglected it for like, I moved to a new state and then I neglected it because I just was like grieving the loss of my last guy. Like he was so amazing. So it's like no one will replace him. But I just recently went and got body work done on Monday and I look like I legitimately look like a wreck. But it's because I got like the scraping, but it was like so needed. And he was like,
Yeah.
I could tell you haven't done anything in a while. And I was like, yeah, but I'm here now. And I think it's like, that's enough. Like, I agree with you. I wish I would have started that sooner in my bodybuilding work. It was like such a game changer my last prep and improvement season. It's like, why wasn't this like at least, even if it's once every 2 months, like I feel like it's worth the investment. Like if people can buy nails, like if their nails done, like you can get body work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think like prioritizing it, even in your improvement seasons, is like super key. And like you're saying, like that scraping, oh my gosh, it's like the best, worst thing.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like, I love the pain. Do it, but
yeah,
don't do it.
exactly.
Um, so you had also changed your training style to a top set style and the use of progressive overload. So can you break down for us what you had been doing before and how this approach was different?
Yeah, before I was doing a lot of like hypertrophy type stuff. So, and I love my previous coach and he's amazing. But I think his training programming was like a little bit old style maybe, or like what people used to do. So it was like a lot of like the 4 sets of 12 to 15. Um, and it would be like 10 different exercises in a day. So like I'd have like shoulder day and it would be like shoulder press, lateral raise, front raise, machine shoulder press, Smith machine press, like all like just kind of an overload of exercises. And then it would be 3 to 4 sets of 12 to 15 reps. And I think that there's a time and a place for that kind of training style. Like I'm not knocking it at all. And obviously like it worked for my body for some time, but I just think I got to a point where that wasn't doing what I needed it to do. I needed to put on more mass. And in order to do that, I just think that you need to lift heavy and you really need to challenge yourself in the gym. And with a lot of that style training that I was doing before, it was so difficult to go heavy because 12 to 15 reps, that starts to feel like cardio if you're trying to lift heavy and do that. And I like during prep, like that would be my training style too. And like I noticed by the end of prep, I'd be using lower weights and it would almost just be like, okay, I'm getting a pump at the gym. I'm not really challenging the muscle. I'm not giving it a reason to stick around. Like I think a big reason why sometimes people lose their muscle in prep is because you're not challenging it. You're not meeting the minimum stimulating threshold that's needed for that muscle to grow or to want to stay. And I get it because, we're tired and we're run down and prep is difficult. You have low energy, but there is a better training style, in my opinion, to mitigate that and force that muscle to really stick around through the prep while you're losing body fat. And so the training that I'm doing now that you talked about, it's top set training. And I do think that it's becoming more popular of a training style, at least like within our community. I've seen it on Instagram. People are doing more of like the top sets and back down sets and stuff like that. But for me, it was completely new. So when I signed on with my coach and he sent me my program, I was like, what's a top set? Like, I was like, what is this? I don't get it. And it just completely changed my physique though. I think for only being with my coach for a few months and then starting prep with him, like I think this training style really helped my body keep the muscle. Like I grew muscle and then I was able to keep it through the long prep. But I guess basically if you're not familiar with top set training, you're lifting very heavy, and it's to failure. That's the way that we train it. So instead of me doing 4 sets of 12 to 15, it would be like, okay, I have 1 set of dumbbell shoulder press and I need to hit, maybe this week it's 9 reps with the weight that I'm working with or whatever it is. Um, and it just forces you to progressively overload over time. And the other thing about that too is with progressive overload, I used to think that it was just like raising your weights. So using like 20, 25, 30, 35. But what I've learned is that it's actually more about the intention and the execution of the movement. So for example, like for me, I've been trying to get the 55s for 10 reps for maybe like, I want to say the past like 3 or 4 months, honestly, because I was in prep when I set this goal for myself. I was like, I'm going to do the 55s. Like that's my goal. And so I was on prep when I started it. And then obviously throughout prep, like your strength does diminish, you can't keep it around indefinitely. But you can definitely keep it up. But so what I did is like, I would get the 55s for maybe 5 one week. And then the next week, maybe I'd get 6. And then the next week, like maybe I'd get 6 again, but I would make sure that the quality of those reps was better. Like maybe the depth was better, or maybe my mind muscle connection was better. And so that's kind of the way I've been progressive overloading these days, is instead of focusing on like upping the weight so much, I'm more so focusing on like the execution and the intent behind it and getting like quality reps.
Okay. So I think that that's a really cool shift that's happening too, where people are focusing more on the quality of their training and getting the most out of the least, if you want to say that.
Yeah. Like you're training smarter instead of like it's important to train hard, but it's almost like it's the smarter way to go about it, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too. Like, I feel like that makes a big difference, is pushing yourself no matter what season you're in. Cause I used to be like, oh, in prep, like you're supposed to like end up being weaker. So like I
Right?
would literally like not lift as heavy. I'm like, what the hell? So now it's like this prep, I feel like I've recomped more than past, because it's like, oh, I'm actually like still trying to progressively overload in the gym, like whether it's through tempo or through reps or through weight, like I'm still focused on that. And I think you're right. Like it's such a game changer, but I don't follow the approach you do now, although I think it's a great approach. That's not what I'm currently doing, but I do follow the approach of like still lifting and pushing yourself in a prep. Like don't just, kind of succumb to, well, it's prep, so I don't have to push as much.
Right. Yeah, I think that's huge. It's not just like, oh, I'm on prep, like I can lift light. It's kind of keeping the intention and executing like to the best of your ability, because your strength isn't going to decrease like that drastically if you're prepping smart. Like you shouldn't have like a giant food cut and then all of a sudden be weak. So I just think that like it's almost the intention, like going into the session intending to lift heavy and intending to get those reps. And then if you don't, like, it's okay, but that the effort was there.
Yes, that's right. So how did your body respond to this change?
It was night and day. I honestly, I should put like up a picture of like the before and after, because I put on so much muscle. Like my delts just really took off, and I think my legs, my arms, like I actually have biceps now, and it's kind of like, it's funny because my boyfriend is like, your arms look so big. Like he's like, you look jacked. I'm like, I know, I do, huh?
So
Like
cool.
it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Do you like the look?
I do. Yeah, I really do. I feel really strong. Like I think I have to be careful. Like I shouldn't grow my upper body too much more, like especially my arms, but I do really like the look of having some muscle.
Yeah, me too. I think it's great. Well, I would love to see that before and after. So if you post it, tag me. whether
Yes,
it's in
I
the
will.
caption, just tag me in the image or send it to me because I want to see it. I think that's great. And then I can reshare it too when the podcast goes out next month. But yeah, I appreciate you breaking that training down and kind of giving us perspective on the different training styles there are out there. Now, let's shift to you as a coach, because you also help people, not just running your podcast and making an impact that way, but you're doing online coaching and you work for an agricultural company. So first of all, what does a normal day look like for you? And then we'll get into like you in the fitness industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically my day is, I feel like it's very normal with like a sprinkle of bodybuilding. It's like I wake up and I take my dog for a walk, and that's kind of like my fasted cardio. And then I log on. So I work from home, and I'm like super lucky. Like my company switched to working from home from like all the COVID stuff. And then like since then we just haven't reopened the office. Like you can go into the office if you want to, but they're like, if you want to work from home, like go for it. So I work from home pretty much every single day. And I log on from like 8 to 5, and I just do like all that work that way. And then I usually go train from like 5:30 to 7:30. And then at night, I'll either like read or eat dinner with my boyfriend, watch Netflix, like just kind of chill, and then repeat. And so then on days when I have client check-ins, like as an online coach, I schedule time in the morning away from my data analyst role. I actually just got promoted, so I'm technically a data steward now, but yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's kind of the same thing as the analyst, just like a little bit more responsibility on like projects and stuff like that. But I'll block time off on my calendar. And so I have like certain times where I do my client check-ins. And then I also have them send me form videos from when they're lifting. So what I try to do is like, if I'm working, if I'm doing like something on an Excel spreadsheet or something for my agricultural job, and I get a check-in or I get a form video, I try and make sure that I respond to those like as quickly as possible, because I know that my clients, like they're in the gym and they're waiting for my response, or they're waiting for my response from their check-ins so they can go about their day. So I try and prioritize that, honestly, because I love coaching. Mostly I just love helping other people. And so I don't ever want them to be just like sitting around and waiting for me. So my biggest check-in days are Monday and Saturday. And then through the week I have a couple, but mostly like Mondays I'll just block out some time, and then I won't take lunch on Mondays with my like normal job just to make up for the time. But yeah, that's kind of how I balance it all.
Oh, wow. I love it. You're very organized.
I am. I feel like time management is a strength of mine, which is really nice. But then also sometimes I get too married to it. So it's like finding the in between.
Yeah, yes, 100% am with you. I feel the same way. I've learned to
It's
let
just the
go.
competitor in us. Like.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yes, as every type A, super driven competitor I've ever met. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like, especially if you're someone who likes lots of different things, like the only way I can do all of this is if I manage my time well enough to do it. And yeah, I don't know that some people are like, oh, well then like I feel like overwhelmed. I'm like, no, I would feel overwhelmed if I didn't manage my time. Like if it wasn't scheduled.
It's like you have to block it out hour by hour, or
yes,
things are just going to get away from you. I don't know.
Exactly. Like I do time blocking on my Google Calendar, and then I have like during the week, like I'll use my planner and I'll be like, okay, so if like XYZ time to XYZ time is client calls, like that's happening, or like I know certain times of the day where I have availability for calls and certain times of the day where I email, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's good.
It is, exactly.
And obviously you've been successful with it, and it's allowing you to not just do your business with your podcast and your online coaching, but also work for a company. So is your goal to go full time in the fitness industry?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's my biggest goal, like my dream. I would love to just full time be in the industry. Whether that's like coaching, posing, like just like I said earlier, like even being a judge or getting involved with like show promoters, sponsors, stuff like that. I would absolutely love that. Yeah.
That's awesome. I feel like there's so many opportunities, and I have no doubt that you could make that happen. I mean, look at everything else you've already accomplished.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And what inspired you to start your podcast? And if someone's listening to this, like, who do you think is your ideal listener so they can check it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wanted to do a podcast. Like in college, me and my friend Chris would always joke about it because we'd always have these like hilarious conversations. And maybe they're just hilarious to us. I don't know, but we would just like go back and forth like for hours, just laughing and talking. And we were like, we could do a podcast. Like this would be so fun. And then like after graduation, we were kind of like, should we actually start one? And so we went back and forth like for so long. And finally in 2021, I was like, Chris, we just need to do this. Like we've joked about it for so long. Like I'm going to start one. Do you want to be my co-host? And like, he was so down. So we came up with the Gymish podcast, which is like, it was supposed to be like mostly rooted in fitness, but then also talking about like just life stuff that pertains to fitness or how it can all connect. And so that's why it's like ish, like it's like kind of gym, but kind of life stuff. And he's in, what is it? I think he's trying to get his master's for public health. So yeah. And so he has like a different perspective as well. So like when I talk on it, like I'm kind of coming from the perspective of a competitor and a coach, but then his perspective is more so somebody who like he goes to the gym maybe like 2-3 times a week. He's really into CrossFit, but he's also done like just going to the gym himself and like writing his own programs. Like he's done bodybuilding type stuff too. And now like from his public health master's like perspective, he kind of brings that in as well. And so I feel like we're able to cover topics in maybe like a different way than maybe just like a standard like competitors podcast, which like I listen to so many podcasts, like everything to do with bodybuilding. Like if it's a podcast, I listen to it. And so I wanted it to be slightly more accessible for like the general population. So I guess like my ideal audience member is somebody who's just interested in getting into fitness or learning more about fitness. And then I also do talk about competing on the podcast. So there's some insight there, but I feel like we've mostly touched on topics like sleep and hydration, recovery, different ways of fitnessing, I guess you could call it. So like Chris has talked about what CrossFit is like, and we've talked about like different kinds of fitness classes that you can go to, like F45, Orange Theory, bar classes, like just pretty much everything under the sun. Like I feel like we've kind of touched on it. So I don't know if you're interested in learning more about fitness as a whole or from a different perspective. I would say you could tune into the Gymish pod.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to recommend, based on some of the titles that I think people find interesting, pre-workout versus coffee. I love that. I think that's like something that's so interesting. Don't give us any insights. We want people to go, listen. You got to go listen to their podcast to find out pre-workout versus coffee, which is better. But I just think it's great that you guys actually fulfilled that dream. You're contributing to Gen Pop. You also reflect on your own journey throughout the podcast, which I think is great. And are you currently servicing mostly Gen Pop? Is your goal to service and prep competitors too?
Yeah, right now my roster is half competitors, half Gen Pop, but all of the competitors that I have are like first time. So I don't have any people who have competed before. But I kind of think it's exciting because these people who are first-time competitors, they're so determined to step on stage and really make like, I don't know, like really be successful. Like I have this one girl, she applied with me and she said she wanted to compete in bikini. And so I asked her, I'm like, do you have a timeline in mind? And she was like, no, I don't have a timeline. Like I want to step on stage when I'm going to be competitive. Like I want to win. And I was
Music to
like,
your ears.
yes. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that so much. Like you're in this for the right reasons. I love it.
That's so cool.
So yeah. So it's pretty exciting. I've prepped men and women. So I had a men's physique competitor. He competed in November for the first time ever, and he did so well. I was so proud of him. And I was nervous because I'm more used to working with women, I guess. And like as a woman myself, like I feel like a lot of my coaching kind of comes from my personal experiences as well. And so coaching a man was something different and kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone, but I think we did really well together. So I'm looking forward to bringing on board like a couple more guys if they want.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we do have men who listen to this. So I think it's cool that you're open to working with men too. And I've worked with men myself in my business work, and it's always an interesting or different dynamic, and I enjoy it. And I think it's like, there's a lot of women who work with male coaches like yourself and myself. So yeah, I think it's good. And I appreciate you sharing that too. Now, what are your goals specifically right now? Like, what are you working off of, or what feedback are you working off of, and what do you want to accomplish?
So my goal is to pro debut this year.
Ooh.
And yeah, I'm already excited. I can't wait. But the feedback that I got from national championships was I need to grow my glutes, and specifically like the upper outer portion. They said that like the glute ham tie-in area was great. So like there's no need for me to grow my glutes as a whole, which is kind of difficult because I'm like, how do I just target that upper outer? Like I'm being very specific with my leg training right now. And then the other feedback that I got was for my front pose, not forcing that back shoulder forward so much, because if you look at my front pose pictures, that back shoulder, you can see the striations in my delt, and they're like, we don't want to see that. Like seeing it's difficult because I actually, this was really cool. Sorry, this is going to be a tangent, but
love a tangent.
I went to that. I went to that women's posing seminar in Las Vegas in January that Sandy Williamson put on. And so I got to pose with like Ashley Kay and Jen Dory and Janet, like they were all there kind of looking over our posing. And Jen actually told me that her feedback from the Olympia was the same as my feedback, that they don't want our shoulders, the back shoulder specifically, like when you're in your front pose, to be turned so far forward, because you actually lose your delt shape. And then if you're like super lean up top, they'll see your delt striations. And like in bikini, they don't want to see any striations. So it was kind of cool because Jen was like, she was telling me, she's like, oh, you're doing that thing with your back shoulder. She's like, I did that too at the Olympia, and that was my feedback. So it made me feel kind of cool. Like I was like, oh, we got the same feedback.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that's a good moment, like to take note of that, where this is why I think they started reframing when we would say X shape. They started, I don't know if you noticed, like, but judges or commentators in the sport and top Olympia competitors started reaffirming S shape, not X shape. And I'm pretty sure that is part of why, is like not squaring off too much.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a good point. You know, I actually didn't notice that, but you're so right. They have started saying, a lot of people now say the S shape. We're going for the S curve and not the X frame.
Yeah, it's like bikini. It's like they're really trying to drive that point home, because we went from Angelica, very S,
Mhm.
Issa, very X, and then Jen, she kind of was like perfect in the middle. And I
Right.
think she brought the S more back. And I think, like you said, that she had that same feedback. And I think she had mentioned in one of her posts about that feedback too. And I was like, oh, I was kind of bummed because I love seeing the shoulder development.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm like, but this is why I'm here. No, but for real though, it's so good to hear that, because we need, like, this is, I love this podcast because we get insight from other people's feedback and experiences. And that's a good reminder for me. Like, I'm taking note, like, okay, like, are you
Yeah.
swearing too much?
Yeah, she told me, like, instead of throwing my elbow so far forward, like, just kind of relax that shoulder. And so for me, that's been a good cue. Like, don't push your elbow out so far forward. Like, you can kind of keep it in line. And so that's kind of helped me. But sometimes I still feel like my little back delt is hiding. I'm like, but now you guys can't see it.
Exactly. You're like, you're supposed to see what's happening here. It looks amazing. And yeah, that's so funny. Well, okay. Is there anything I didn't ask you before we get into my last couple questions about advice? Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish that I did?
No, I think you asked me so much. Yeah, I think you hit everything.
Yeah, we've had a productive conversation. So, what's your best advice for people who've never competed before but would like to? And then your best advice for those on their road to pro?
For those who've never competed, I would say my best advice is to just do your research and make sure that as you're getting into it, it's something that you truly want to do. Like, maybe even go to a local show. But then on the flip side of that, like, don't do too much research that you're frozen. Sometimes you kind of have to just go do it. So I feel like that's a little contradictory, but like, do enough research, maybe in terms of like hiring a coach and figuring out like exactly what you want to do in the sport or with competing, like figure out your why. But then don't overdo that research so much that you're like frozen in place and you have that analysis paralysis and you can't make a move. Like, sometimes you're just going to have to like make the move and do it to figure it out. So yeah, I would just say, like, do your research, but then also just go for it.
Love that. And what
And
about those on
then,
their road to pro?
oh gosh, on the road to pro, I honestly, I feel like it's kind of cliche, but I would just say, like, keep showing up, and you need to embody a pro in order to become a pro. The work that you do on a daily basis, it really does matter. Like, whether you're in your improvement season or you're prepping right now, um, if you want to go pro, like, you have to do the things that pros do, and that means like not missing a beat and doing everything exactly to the plan and just executing. Um, and just keep showing up to the shows. I was made friends with Lizzie backstage at National Championships, Lizzie Cunningham, and she had such a long journey, and it was so cool to see her get her pro card in person, and just the emotion that was flowing from her on stage. You could tell that she put her whole heart into it, and I think the biggest thing with her, like, she just kept showing up. So when it's your time, it's going to happen. You can't give up. You just have to keep showing up.
I love that advice. Like, keep showing up, get your heart in it, make sure that's felt on stage. And it's funny you mentioned Lizzie, because I followed up with her today actually about getting her on the podcast.
Yay.
Because we met in the elevators at USA's in 2020. And she's like, are you Celeste? I was like, yeah. And then we talked about the podcast and I was like, oh, you'll be on it, like, for sure. And then she got her pro card and I was like, you coming on the podcast, right? And she's like, hell yeah. So I reminded her today to get the form done. I'm so excited to have her on. And hearing you mention that too, I'm going to have to bring that up to her, if I can remember to bring it up to her, that you recognize that and see what she thinks.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, I love her so much. That's awesome. She's such a great person.
Oh, that's so cool. This sport is amazing. Like, our community is just the best.
It is. It's my favorite part, I think, is like all the community and the connections and everything.
Yeah. I think I'm like you, I'm introverted, but I will say, like, this podcast, this sport, the connections made are so easy because it's natural and we have so much we can connect on, that it's helped me combat some of that introverted nature because it's safer because people are so accepting and amazing.
Yeah, exactly. We're all in it, and we're all driven, and it's just, there's so many like-minded people who are passionate about it. It's just easy to connect with, I guess.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for coming on. If you can share how everybody can find you, connect with you, even inquire about working with you, that would be awesome.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram at Noah McCabe, and my application to work with me is through a link in my bio. And then if you want to chat, my DMs are open. I love connecting with people. So just shoot me a DM there if you want to chat, but Instagram is probably the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to put that in the show notes along with the link you have in your bio. So you guys, that's always at celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening right away, episode's going to be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section. It's alphabetized. Find Elenoa, and then you'll click on that and you'll see timestamps. So if you want to go back and hear certain things, episode show notes, summary of topics covered, and all the links to connect as well, and any resources too that might have come up. So I always recommend checking that out, especially if you're wondering about topics that have been covered on the podcast. It's a great way to figure it out. Thank you guys so much for listening. And Elenoa, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Of course, it was my pleasure. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode.